it's Jane at Fired For You. I just thought I'd do a quick behind the scenes video and show you how we load the kiln. So after it's been painted and you've left it with us and we've glazed it and let it dry, we then have to load each piece individually into the kiln, and depending what the piece is depends on how we load it into the kiln. So I'm going to select a plate from here, which is actually a clock. It's got a hole drilled out. Now in order to put this in the kiln, we need to make sure that the foot, this raised piece on the back of the plate, is clear of all paint and glaze. Otherwise, when it goes in the kiln, it will fuse to the shelf and be there forever, which is not a good thing. So we're using this orange dry footing mat, as we call it. It's made out of neoprene foam sponge, and as and when we've used it, each time we have to wash out the sink and give it a really good squeeze, and every now and again it goes through my washing machine just for extra fun. So it's been sprayed wet with this fine spray, and we just give it a spray like that just to wet the surface, and then we have to hold the piece flat and firmly push it backwards and forwards, and then just give it a wipe and check, and then you'll see it's come off around the foot. Now there's also dribbles on the back, so we just need to sand those off because it does melt when it's in the kiln, but it doesn't always move out smoothly. So any marks, we just do a bit of finger sanding, and then just use this little gadget, which is not actually intended for this. It's an old one that goes in rods, and you sit tiles on it in a tile crank to load lots of tiles up in the kiln. As and when we do big mosaics for people. So just smoothing out some of it, you can get rid of your finger, and other bits it just needs a little bit more extra to come off, and sometimes you just can never get rid of it perfectly, but it is all handmade. But this is why it takes us a while to load the kiln, so it doesn't just happen by magic, unfortunately. We give each piece a bit of intention, smooth it off, just check that's on there, and then we have to load it into the kiln. And I've got to go right to the bottom on here to get that one in the base there. And now whilst it's going to be a clock, it's technically a plate. We can put a T crank over it. This is what this is. So it is T shape, and which is where it gets its name from, and it will sit over the plate without touching the plate. And we smooth it away from the edge there, and that means we can get another plate on here. This has got a pencil drawing on it, so I'm just smoothing over where the glaze has had a little bit of reaction with the pencil, and again give it a wipe, check the back, and just smooth the dribbles off. It's very difficult when you dip it in glaze to, you wait for it to stop dripping, and then you think it's all done, and of course you put it on the shelf and it'll move while it's drying. So just give that a helping hand. That's not quite come off the back there. So there we go, so it's all nice and clean, and then that can go on top, and this time it goes on top of the T crank, and that's how you stack plates in the kiln there. So anything that is like a tile, so some spare bits here, that if it's got a smooth base on it, has to go on a stilt. And these have special metal in it that does not melt in the temperature of the kiln when we fire glaze, which goes on at 1010 degrees. It takes about 8 or 9 hours to get up to that temperature, and then the rest of the 24 hours it allows it to cool down back to 0 before we can open it. So if you've got a flat piece that doesn't have any rims to take off, we have to put that on there and then turn it over and sit it on the kiln shelf like that. And then in order to put more pieces in the kiln, we take these are called props, and they go from this size up to really tall, and we can stack them on top of each other. So these go in a triangular formation inside the kiln on the shelf, and make sure there's a good inch clearance above the tallest piece on the shelf, and then we sit another shelf on top which are called bats. I'm not sure why, it's an old pottery term. So these will go in here. I'm going to just put shorter ones in, so they'll go above the plates, and just make sure they're all the same height. And I'll put them in against the kiln wall in a triangle, so you'll be able to see there. And then we get, once that shelf is full, then get the next shelf. These are quite heavy, and I'm used to like moving them around, so but they are actually quite a weight. And then we have to put it in at an angle so we don't hit the thermostat that's sticking out to do the temperature check, and then lower it into the kiln to sit on those 3 props. Make sure it's steady and sorted, and then you can start loading more pottery into there. So that's how we load our kiln. This is Kelvin, by the way.